This is John Cena. Smash the like button if you think that it's ridiculous to compare Jon Moxley to Stone Cold Steve Austin.
You see, it's comments like this. It's proof that Stone Cold Steve Austin is the greatest of all time when it comes to fake pro wrestling. He is the standard of fake pro wrestling. What part of that don't you understand? Stone Cold Steve Austin is the greatest of all time. Here is the standard. Who sells the most merch? Who sold out the most arenas? That's my point. Who is still the most talked about old school wrestler of all time? It's Stone Cold Steve Austin. Everybody gets compared to Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's so dumb to say Shawn Michaels is the best of all time when Stone Cold Steve Austin literally outdrew Shawn Michaels. What is your qualification? Everything is not about the fake pro wrestling. Did you have an impact on the ratings, merch sales, ticket sales? Shawn Michaels don't compare, man. Shawn don't compare to Austin. Bret Hart, maybe Hogan, Rock, but that's it. That's my standard. Did you draw? Are you the biggest draw of all time? Did you sell tons of merch? This guy has been retired for over 20-some years, and yet he is still in the top 10 in merch sales. That's called impact. That's called being a GOAT. That's called having a long-lasting legacy. He brought the World Wrestling Federation back into the mainstream during the late 90s. He saved this company. He beat out WCW. Okay, this dude, he outdrew Hulk Hogan. He outdrew Hollywood Hulk Hogan. He outdrew the NWO. He outdrew Goldberg. He outdrew Sting. That's called being the best of the best. Nobody is at the level of Stone Cold Steve Austin. He is the standard that everybody has to live up to. It's not John Cena. It's Stone Cold motherfucking Steve Austin. 20-some years later, we are still comparing Stone Cold Steve Austin to LA Cosplay, fucking Dean Ambrose. I can't believe Tony Schiavone said Dean Ambrose is the closest thing to Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm like, bruh, where's your evidence? Because you have no credibility. Hell, I got more credibility than fucking Tony, and here's why. I watched the Attitude Era. You didn't. How did Tony Schiavone watch the Attitude Era? When he was on Nitro calling matches, where did you find the time, man? Did he have it on VCR? Maybe he had it on record. Where did you find the time to watch the Attitude Era in your prime years in the late 90s? If you were busy calling matches on Nitro, you did not watch Stone Cold Steve Austin. You did not have the time because there was no DVR back then. You couldn't go back and watch Raw shows back then unless you had it on VCR and you had it on record. You could not go back and watch Raw. So how would you know if Dean Ambrose is the closest thing to Stone Cold Steve Austin? Listen, he is not Stone Cold Steve Austin. Hell, it's an insult. To me, Dean is a cosplayer. That's all. I see a cosplayer, a guy that's trying to be Stone Cold, but it's not working. Stone Cold was special. He was funny, badass. This dude had tons of charisma. He could play any role. His most underrated role was when he was the leader of the Alliance. I felt like Stone Cold, he showed his versatility when he was the leader of the Alliance because he was funny and he was a badass at the same time. So he was not one-dimensional. He evolved. Go back and watch the WCW Invasion angle. I think those were his best years because, man, he was so entertaining with Kurt Angle. So he showed range. I think the best version of Dean Ambrose was when he was a world champion on SmackDown. That was the best version of Dean Ambrose. But ever since then, I don't see it. But how is he Stone Cold Steve Austin if he's trying to be him? You see, if anything, I think Adam Page is more Stone Cold than him. And guess what? At least Adam Page is not trying to be like Austin. That's what I respect. I'm the only guy who compares Adam Page to a poor man's Stone Cold Steve Austin. Why? Because he's not trying to be like Austin. Adam Page, he shows traits. He shows mannerisms of a Stone Cold sometimes, but not all the time. But that's not the point. He's not trying to be him, but I see small little traits, small little elements of Stone Cold Steve Austin as of late. But Ambrose is a tryhard. Oh my God, he is a super tryhard. And most importantly, Stone Cold did not bleed all that often. On rare occasions, he bled, but not every fucking year. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm not saying that Adam Page is Stone Cold Steve Austin. No, he shows small little traits, small little elements of Stone Cold Steve Austin with his current gimmick. Now, let's talk about Jim Cornette, the same man who called Eddie Kingston the new Stone Cold Steve Austin. So please, shut the fuck up. How come everybody gets compared to Stone Cold Steve Austin? For what? Stone Cold Steve Austin is the standard that everybody has to live up to. People still miss Steve Austin. Hence why everybody wants to crown the next Stone Cold Steve Austin. Even though LA cosplay is obviously a fucking ripoff and a fucking joke. Now, let's get back on Dean Ambrose. Ever since that Stone Cold interview with Dean Ambrose, I have had no respect for Dean Ambrose. That was an awful interview. Stone Cold did his job. It's just, I feel like Dean Ambrose was high. Drunk or high, he fucked up that interview, and he wants to blame Vince McMahon for his downfall in the World Wrestling Federation. No, bitch, it was that interview, right? Why would Vince McMahon push you as a top guy if you botched an interview with the GOAT, Stone Cold Steve Austin? You botched that interview. Vince McMahon said, you know what? I'm going to push Roman Reigns. I'm going to push Rollins. I'm going to make Dean Ambrose a background player. He is not a top guy. That was an awful fucking interview for a top guy who was the world champion. He was the world champion, and he botched that interview. I think he was drunk, either high or drunk. He came off awful in the interview. In the interview, it hurt his push in the World Wrestling Federation. So he is to blame for his demise in the World Wrestling Federation. It was all on him. But to get back to Tony Schiavone, where did you find the time to watch Stone Cold Steve Austin? What do you know about Austin? Because you don't know shit about Stone Cold Steve Austin. Dean Ambrose is not Austin. He is the opposite of Stone Cold Steve Austin. He is a ripoff cosplayer, worse than LA cosplay, because it feels like he's trying too hard to be like Austin. When you are calling somebody a modern day Stone Cold Steve Austin, what do you mean by that? Because Stone Cold was the definition of star. He was a megastar in terms of he sold the most merch. He drew in the most ratings. Dean Ambrose is not doing any of that. He never did. It's like, stop disrespecting the past, man. You gotta give us more facts and evidence. Because with attitude, charisma, I'm not saying it. I'm not saying no traits, no elements. I think Dean Ambrose is a cosplay Terry Funk. That's what he is. Dean Ambrose is a cosplay Terry Funk. And most importantly, Stone Cold never had a faction. He had only one faction, and that was the WCW Invasion Angle. But besides that, Austin was always alone. Dean Ambrose does not like being alone. He needs to be in a faction in every company he's in. And he's always the less over in every faction. He's always the less popular guy in every faction he's in. Even CM Junk said it. Obviously, he was the most less popular member of the Shield, same as the BBC. Now, make that make sense. If you are Stone Cold Steve Austin, you gotta be the most popular guy in your faction. It should not be a toss-up or a fucking argument. Dale Bryan was the most popular guy in the BBC. And first off, this guy does not have any ring gear, okay? He ain't Stone Cold Steve Austin. He don't have any ring gear. He looks like a damn fucking car mechanic. That's what he looks like. Dean Ambrose looks like a car mechanic at fucking Pep Boys. Okay, he is not Stone Cold Steve Austin. At least Austin had ring gear, and he's a hardcore wrestler. He is a wannabe deathmatch wrestler. So no, you cannot compare him to Stone Cold Steve Austin. He is not a hardcore wrestler. Austin was a regular wrestler. He was not a hardcore guy. He was not in any death matches. It's like, man, just because you see a white boy with a defiant attitude, that don't make you Stone Cold Steve Austin. Let me repeat. Just because you a white boy with a defiant attitude, that don't make you Stone Cold motherfucking Austin. Okay, every group that Stone Cold was always in, he was always the most talented. Now, let's compare that to Dean Ambrose. Okay, was he the most popular guy in the Shield? No, he was the third wheel. Was he the most talented guy in the BBC? No. If anything, Dean Ambrose is still the most least talented guy in the BBC. Right now, I think he has the least amount of talent. Okay, is he better than Pac? Is he better than fucking Cesaro? No. Was he better than fucking Bryan Danielson? No. Does he have more in-ring talent than Wheeler? Useless. I'm gonna say no. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. He is still the least most talented guy in his own group, even in a different company. That's crazy. But you want to blame Vince McMahon for your demise. I'm like, bitch, why don't you blame your Stone Cold interview? You botched that awful interview. That's what led you down to being a mid-carder. That's what made you a fucking mid-card guy. That interview. You are supposed to be a top guy, the face of the brand, but you came across as a drunk, a guy that was most likely high in that interview. But you want to blame others for your failures in the World Wrestling Federation. No, bitch, that's not how that works. You are not Stone Cold Steve Austin, bitch. Listen, before you call somebody the next Stone Cold Steve Austin, how about you check the ratings first? How about you check the merch sales? How about you check the audience reaction first? That's what Stone Cold Steve Austin was all about. He was the face of the business, not just the WWF. He was the face of the business. He was the face of pop culture in the late 90s. That's how big he was. He was on Celebrity Deathmatch. He was on cartoon shows. That's how big he was. He was a massive megastar. He had comic books. Stone Cold Steve Austin had comic books. He was the face of Celebrity Deathmatch on MTV. He was a part of pop culture. Now, I do respect everything that Dean Ambrose has brought to All Elite Fake Pro Wrestling. With his small star power, yes, he has helped All Elite Fake Pro Wrestling. But let's be honest, he's more so Kurt Angle of TNA. That's who he is. He's Kurt Angle from TNA. He is bringing that kind of star power that Kurt did. But Kurt Angle is not Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's who Dean Ambrose is. He's Kurt Angle of TNA for All Elite Fake Pro Wrestling. Austin had better matches. He was the better wrestler than Dean Ambrose. People don't realize Austin was a great in-ring performer when he was in WCW. And up to that point, when he wrestled Owen Hart, that damn prick, Austin was a top 5 guy in the company based off in-ring ability. That's how good he was. That's why he was called the Ring Master, because he was a master of the ring. Stone Cold had it all. And also, he was a great seller. And he was a great heel and a great face. As a face, the crowd felt sorry for him. That's how good he was in the ring. He could play both roles. He was a great seller, and he played a great heel also. He was very underrated after 1999. He had very good matches that worked for his style. Yes, he was a brawler, but he was still entertaining as a brawler. Anybody who thinks that Dean Ambrose is on the same level as a Stone Cold Steve Austin, once that bell rings, you are a dummy.